Amanda. Thank you so much for having us. We are delighted to be here with you and together. The title of my talk is up on the wall. I'm going to tell you some stories today because stories are the deepest form for understanding our lives, and we are all drawn to them. Children curl up in your lap when you begin. Adults lean in when a conversation that we're having turns to a good story. Your mind instinctively begins to use the stories it knows to draw parallels among stories. Stories beget stories. And it's important for us to know the good ones, not only for delight and a little blessed self-forgetfulness, desperately scarce in our time, but for the knowing, wisdom, and imagination they infuse into our lives. Art gives us a trail of breadcrumbs back to reality. When it succeeds, it ushers us into the saving power of the imagination by giving us an experience that tells us true things that we can live by. Like some of you, I did not read these epics growing up. I came to them as a parent because I didn't go to Liberty Commons. Late as I was to read them, they've added immeasurably to my life. My tangible goal today, beyond delighting you with a pattern, is to convince you to read or reread the homecoming stories I'm meditating on, and to let their beauty and skill inform your lived life. Best of all, do this with others, faculty, parents, friends, family, but I'll settle for your doing it at all. These books can be daunting, so I will tell them to you and show how they move in parallel lines to each other and to your life. We'll also notice where they diverge. This noticing is one of the great pleasures of reading. We'll look at three, more or less three, Homer's two, Virgil's Aeneid, and Marilynne Robinson's Gilead books. Homecomings that ask us, why stories and why home? In addition to teaching college students, I teach fairy tales and myths weekly to 4 to 8-year-olds. Before they can read, they can already catalog wicked stepmothers, clever third sons, abandoned children. They call out that this story reminds them of another, and they're learning what wise people do when misfortune comes. In the same way, you need stories to guide your life. News and facts alone won't do justice. Why are stories and the love of them planted so deeply in us? See if these homecoming stories help you to answer that. One of the oldest and most influential stories began as an oral tale at least 2,700 years ago. All of the stories that we've read are arguably a footnote to the Iliad and the Odyssey. When I think about the Iliad and the Odyssey, I'm aware of several elements. Chief among them is the exigency of war. Odysseus, king of Ithaca, was wise enough not to want to go to war with Troy. He had a young son. He even feigned madness to stay at home until the ruse would have required him to plow over his baby. He chose war, and it lasted 10 years. The Greeks were losing largely because of Troy's remarkable walls, so the shrewd Odysseus devised the false sacrifice, the Trojan horse. The horse is wheeled in at night. The Greeks slip out and take the city. The victors are ruthless. They throw Hector and Andromache's baby from the walls. Then begins Odysseus's long return. Along the way, he's offered remarkable alternatives to home, including immortality, life forever beside a goddess of glamour, wealth, and sexual power. After years, he sits by the water and weeps, a poignant image. Aren't those the things we think we want? Isn't that what our global, sexualized, money-hungry culture says to want? And yet he weeps. Released, he takes again to the seas. Poseidon opposes him because Odysseus blinded Poseidon's son, Polyphemus, the Cyclops, and then proudly shouted his real name from the safety of his ship. Fairy tales teach you not to give your name to the monster. Odysseus is not yet humble and wise. He doesn't know the right stories. The Greek gods act like superhumans without a moral code, capricious, jealous, playing favorites. Some have thought them demi-demons, stirring up conflict for sport. Still, they replaced earlier forces of blind darkness and fear. Odysseus keeps getting blown off course by Poseidon and by his own vice. He's clever, strong, but not perfect. He cavorts with demigoddesses. He loses all his men through incaution. Like us, he's tempted by curiositas, an unhealthy curiosity. Pascal warns us against this when he says all humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly without an iPhone in a room alone. Do you agree? Before he is delivered to true help, he descends to the land of the dead and meets Achilles, the glory-drenched hero. We've been speaking of Nostos, homecoming, but its ancient counterweight is kleos, glory, fame that outlives you through song. In a moment of underworld truth, Achilles tells Odysseus he would rather be the lowest servant on earth than a lord in Hades. Is it better to achieve renown or to come home? The Odyssey places these values in contest, a question for our ordinary lives and choices to ask. At last, Odysseus washes ashore in a well-ordered kingdom, ruled by Alcinous and the queen Arete, whose name means excellence. Because of their order and justice, they can help others. They shelter him, load him with gifts, and return him, hidden from Poseidon's eye, to Ithaca. But you can come home and still not have a home. His house is overrun with suitors, young men, by his own subjects trying to marry Penelope, his wife. For 20 years, she's kept the hearth. She weaves by day and unweaves by night to postpone remarriage, outwitting a house full of swaggering, predatory men who consume her husband's goods and taunt her son, Telemachus. Students sometimes assume the poem devalues women, but read carefully. Penelope is queenly, wise, as cunning as her husband. Arete rules as an equal partner. In her own way, Penelope defeats a household of men at the height of their virility. In the swineherd's hut, father and son finally meet. Odysseus reveals himself. They embrace. With this is a quote from the book, he sat down, and Telemachus flung his arms around him and wept. Sorry. They keened aloud, louder than birds of prey, whose nests have been robbed of their unfledged chicks, and sunset would have found them still weeping. You probably know the grief of a late reunion, the ache of all that was lost, even as the beloved is restored. What might it do for our sons and daughters and ourselves to live with that image? What does it teach us about masculinity as Penelope's strength instructs femininity? Odysseus and Telemachus retake the palace in a calculated slaughter. A whole generation of their best young men dies. Getting home exacts a cost. It's not sentimental. Our absence has been costly and can't be entirely restored. Homer's Homecoming establishes the authority, cost, and worth of home. War, even glory-seeking, is grief that disturbs order. We see men and women working together in exigency. We see the need for two good parents. We see, too, the horror of bad parents who sacrifice their children. Fascinatingly, these poems rehabilitated warriors in their own time. The Greeks dealt with the aftermath of war trauma by singing these epics together in community over days. The songs mourned Trojans as much as Greeks, a universal compassion that heals. This became the template homecoming for Greek civilization and for all that followed. When Augustus wanted to unite Rome some 800 years later, he commissioned a story for his nation. Think of Homer's staying power. 800 years later. What is our epic in America to memorize and cherish for unity and rehabilitation? I've taken students to Gettysburg battlefields to recite Whitman's When Lilacs Last and the Dooryard Bloomed and Lincoln's address. But I think we all need to think about this and unite around it. Augustus ended decades of civil war and initiated the Pax Romana. One of his principal tools was Virgil's Aeneid. Aeneas, son of Anchises and Venus, escapes burning Troy. Virgil sets a Homeric hero in a Homeric age, but for an un-Homeric purpose, to foreshadow Rome as a home. Aeneas' task is to make a new home for a war-ravaged remnant, bring them by sea to Italy, unite with the peoples there, and found a city. This is the loser's homecoming. Your home is razed. Fields are sown with salt. There is no return. You must begin again. Roman piety is pictured in Aeneas carrying his father on his shoulders, holding his young son's hand, gathering others to the ship. Beauty begets beauty. Bernini's sculpture captures this moment. Piety lives for more than self, ancestors who brought you here, and the children given to your care. He lands in Carthage, ruled by wise Queen Dido. In Juno's temple, he sees frescoes of the Trojan War, his own life painted on the walls. The first time I read this, I was like, what? What an amazing thing to happen. He weeps openly, another manly hero who weeps. A magnificent banquet follows. Dido begs for his story. He tells of returning to find his wife, Creusa, dead, a ghost he tries to embrace 3 times. He sails on. Dido and Aeneas soon shelter in a cave, and she calls it marriage. It is perhaps the first sad hookup story, a scourge in our own time. They live this way a while. But a messenger comes. You have work to do, Aeneas. The city's building has ceased under this fever. This is not fruitful. Your life is not your own. It is for your people, your civitas, your son, your father. Go. He knows it's true and knows it will devastate Dido. He makes the fatal error of preparing to leave in secret. Confronted, he still departs. In despair, she mounts a pyre and immolates herself. He sees the smoke at sea and grieves, but presses on, damage in his wake. Like Odysseus, he is not without flaws. Along the way, he meets Andromache, Hector's widow, now wife-slave to Achilles' son. She tends a pretend grave for Hector and mourns the toddler of hers, hurled from the walls. War's curse on persons and culture. These stories name our traumas, and by naming them, begin to heal. Eventually, war comes again in Italy. Virgil's warriors are not anonymous, however, very different from Homer's. They are named with brief, tender strokes that dignify what is lost. Even the enemy dead are seen as persons, sons. Here are a couple of examples. Next quote. This is Virgil talking about Aeneas's enemies who are killed. and this is how he describes them. Next, Aeneas struck Lycus down, a man excised from his dead mother's womb, and held then consecrate to thee, Apollo, as one who had been granted immunity in infancy from the perilous knife, but now before us is dying. This is a moment of great grief, but also of remarkable sympathy for the enemy. There are no victors. And you, twin brothers too, another example. Laertes, Thymber, fell on the Rutulian field, identical sons of Daucus, so alike their parents, happily bemused, could never tell the two apart. Such a grief to have these details of these lives that were struggled for, whose parents loved them and laughed at the identical twinness of them, or the one that was rescued from the womb and then dies on the battlefield. And Virgil's, one of his geniuses is to include that and to touch us in like a sentence with that grief. Virgil wrote feverishly at life's end, longing to revise. He asked that the poem be burned if he died without time to do that. It survived unfinished, and we are grateful. It's a founding homecoming, Rome born from ruin, told in the key of duty, piety, pity, and costly love. We leap to our own time. Marilynne Robinson's Gilead, 2004, later joined by 3 companion novels, retells homecoming through different eyes, one story told 4 times, which itself is an epic quality. Gilead, the first, which won the Pulitzer Prize, centers on John Ames, a 70-something pastor in Iowa, son and grandson of pastors. He married young and lost his wife and daughter in childbirth. This is the wrong slide. Then lived a lonely life of prayer and reading, contemplation, walking. Late in life, he meets Lila, a homeless woman hardened by trauma, yet full of thought. He falls in love. He meets her in his own church. She enters the back. He sees her and falls in love at first sight. They marry. A child is born, Robert, whom he writes letters to, since the boy will grow up without him. The epic question of what outlives us is here, in a small Midwestern town. Letters as a bid for another kind of glory, a stay against death. Lila, with 1 year of schooling, reads Ezekiel and copies it into dime store notebooks. She reads herself into Israel's homecoming and is consoled. Even the most oppressed human is heroic, according to Robinson. Her nostos is the slow work of believing she belongs anywhere. She talks to the child in her womb, tries to make her body a home, resists the mixtape of despairing thoughts in her head, and learns to abide a place, the town, this man, this child. The battles are interior. The heroism is co-suffering love. Home narrows to 3. Reverend Robert Boughton, his daughter Glory, and his prodigal son, Jack. The father is dying. Glory returns, wounded by a failed romance, knowing she'll never marry or have children. Jack returns after 20 years away, Jack, her older brother, having missed his mother's death and funeral. Robinson says in this book, Gilead, I'm telling you about home, but referring back to Gilead now. Each person is a civilization built on the ruins of preceding ones, like Rome and Greece, Virgil on Homer. A home is a little city we attempt to govern well. Most of us never reach the level of Arete and Alcinous, though at the center of it is the mystery of being bound to each other's suffering and strangeness. According to Robinson, the only thing worse than family life is not having one. John Ames calls his loneliness my own dark time. Lila's alternative home is neglect until a mother figure doll steals her into care. Robinson is no anti-family prophet. She knows family is the best of the worst options available, like democracy in America, and that being itself, is good, braided with love. We watch broken people in this novel delight in being. We watch them plant small gardens, roses and vegetables, modestly fruitful. Jack comes home to sound Gilead. Could he bring his African-American wife and son here? Few know this. This is the beginning of the civil rights movement. Few know this. To most, he's simply the prodigal. Like Odysseus, he returns after 20 years to a dying father. His sister, Glory, whose very name echoes Kleos, shows him a profound hospitality that is both compassionate and restrained. She is the book's limited, omniscient gaze. Through her, we see Jack's strange honesty. When anxious, the exposed skeletal machinery of conventional behavior. She gives him small tasks to help him forget himself, noticing how others misread him and how hard it is for him to belong anywhere. Their siblings, I think they have 6, are hale and estimable. One a doctor who gets to save people, one who gets to save people, unlike Jack, who, has nothing to boast about. One of our family's wounds is that not all land in the same place. Sometimes one child is the stranger, born into an estimable tribe. Robinson lets us feel this without malice. Glory dreamed of 3 children and a home, not this, quote, good and blessed fustian and oppressive tabernacle of Boughton probity. That's how her home is described. I'm going to read it to you one more time. Not this good and blessed and fustian and oppressive tabernacle of Boughton probity. What do we do when our longed for vision doesn't come to pass? How do we carry on? Robinson layers the Judeo-Christian civilization atop the Trojan, Greek, and Roman. She says, all bread is the bread of heaven. God is faithful. He lets us wander so we will know what it means to come home. We don't just need to reach Ithaca or the bed of Penelope or the eternal city. We need to come home to ourselves. We are often strange to ourselves and to our beloveds, yet the goodness of ordinary bread grown out back is both manna and Eucharist, given through sweat and thorns. The novel is the breakdown of the human, the epic, the raising of the hero. Robinson gives us the profoundly Judeo-Christian heroism of home, bearing one another's burdens in the daily pierce and bless rhythm of a kitchen, a porch, a sick room. Boughton's prodigal returns with goodwill, and a torturous scene unfolds, his prodigal Jack. The old man who has so faithfully extended grace, and this is another Telemachus, Odysseus, but it's even more painful maybe, now lacerates his son Jack, confessing the unendurable grief he has caused his father. He cannot sustain his co-suffering here at the end. The father cannot. Glory answers her father by pointing out that Jack is here now. His life has been hard and sad. He has come home. She bears none of the marks of the older brother. She is beatitude and blessing. The book does not end there. Glory finds a terrible shock of joy, no worse than joy, peace, flooding like blood into a starved limb. Wild rescue, painful and wonderful and humbling. And John Ames says this, Wherever you turn your eyes, the world can shine like transfiguration. Only who could have the courage to see it? Sight that transfigures is costly. It holds tragedy and transfiguration together. Nostos and Kleos are converted into homecoming in this American story, and glory that sounds like the Beatitudes. Blessed are those who mourn, who hunger and thirst. Our ordinary lives are heroic. Our beloveds can be strangers. Our sorrows can give us strength to nourish others. These stories, surviving for 3 millennia, read by Robinson deeply, still tell us great and unsearchable things we need to know. So why stories and why home? Because stories beget stories and lives. Because art leaves breadcrumbs back to reality. Because the imagination can save you by telling you true things to live by. Homer sings the cost of getting home and the peril of trading it for glory. Virgil shows how to find home after ruin by self-giving, carrying father and son and an exiled people at once. Robinson transposes the epic hero into porches and kitchens where co-suffering becomes courage. Read or reread these homecoming stories. Let them work on you. Best of all, do it with others. A little civitas of reading. We talk about forming persons. These are the books that do it, tenderly and sternly at once. As I face my own mortality, I do not regret one moment spent on these books. Thank you.